Hey guys, welcome back to A History of Horror. A couple years after the success of Dracula and Frankenstein, Universal re-released both movies in the theaters. Audiences flooded in at greater numbers than when the movies were initially released, so it was clear that this newfound genre of monsters was a goldmine. So, within a year, Universal released their first ever horror sequel.
The Bride of Frankenstein.
James Whale came back to direct it, and Colin Clive reprised his role as Henry Frankenstein. Universal had gotten used to sound movies by this time, and as a result, Bride of Frankenstein is arguably better than the original. You'll notice that this is not a common theme with most horror movies. Many parts from the novel that were left out in 1931 are portrayed in Bride, along with several liberties they took with the plot in order to complete the story. It starts off with Mary and Percy Shelley hanging out with Lord Byron in their lakefront mansion. Mary Shelley recounts the previous movie for those who missed it, and continues on with the rest of the story. She's played by Elsa Lanchester, who would also play the bride later on. The plot picks up where the last one left off, with Henry Frankenstein recovering from his injuries and the monster presumably dead. One of the villagers returned to the windmill because he wants to confirm that the monster is really dead. However, he accidentally falls into the shaft beneath the windmill and finds that the monster is very much alive. Before he can alert the town, the monster immediately strangles him to death and escapes. Meanwhile, Frankenstein decides that he wants to leave his experiments and move on with his life. He meets another mad scientist named Dr. Pretorius, played by Ernest Thesiger, who is crazier than he was in the first movie. Pretorius also works on creating life, but instead of using dead tissue, he grows tiny humans in little jars. It's one of my favorite scenes in the whole movie. Great special effects for 1935, and just fun overall. Pretorius wants Frankenstein to create a new monster, but Frankenstein has no interest. The monster wanders the countryside trying to survive, but he keeps getting attacked by local villagers. Remembering that he's somewhat of a victim himself, it's easy for the audience to feel sympathy for him. He finds a cabin in the woods and hangs out with an old blind hermit who just wants to have a friend. It's a pivotal scene because it's where the monster first learns how to talk and become more human. It's both heartwarming and sad, especially when two hunters find the monster and chase him away, leaving the poor old hermit alone again. The monster stumbles upon Dr. Pretorius' lab, and together they begin to plot against Frankenstein, later kidnapping his wife. The goal is to blackmail Frankenstein and force him to make an undead wife for the monster. Though he's reluctant at first, he eventually gives in. This gives us another laboratory scene with some awesome effects and gadgets. Ultimately, the team succeeds in creating a bride for the monster.
She's alive! Alive!
Despite this being her only appearance ever, and without any dialogue, the bride has become part of pop culture. Her look has been parodied and used for Halloween costumes for decades. They even paid homage to her in the Rocky Horror Picture Show. At this point, I think I need to chime in on the confusion regarding the monster's name. We all know that Frankenstein is the name of the doctor, not the monster. The monster was never given a name in the novel, and there's a point to that. He was supposed to represent a living being neglected by his creator, even going so far as to not have a name. But then you have movies like Bride of Frankenstein, Frankenstein meets the Wolfman, and Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein, and it only leads to more confusion. There was even a short clip from 1934 showing Lugosi and Karloff playing chess, and Lugosi blatantly calls Karloff Frankenstein.
Ready for the test, Dracula? I'm ready, Frankenstein.
You know, I'm gonna go ahead and give everyone in the world permission to call the monster Frankenstein. It's not proper, but I promise that I'll never correct you, and I'll know exactly what you mean. We're closing up on the 1930s, and there are a few movies that I would have liked to have covered, but didn't get around to. I'm only doing 50 total, and I want to still have room to cover the next 80 years. These include The Invisible Man, White Zombie, and Freaks. They aren't necessarily horror movies per se, but they have some creepy elements, and I think they're worth a watch. Well, that's all for today. Next week will be the last episode that I do for a while. It will take us into the 1940s for the Wolfman. Thanks for watching.